Well, during the '04 presidential race, many on the left said the Bush White House was trying to use the politics of fear to get reelected. Now this morning, that same claim is coming from a former Bush insider, America's first Secretary of Homeland Security, former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge.
That's right. He has a new book that's coming out, and in it, Ridge says that he was pressured to raise the nation's terror alert ahead of Election Day. But a former Homeland Security advisor for the Bush administration, Fran Townsend, says that's not what happened. Fran is also a CNN national security contributor, and she joins us this morning from Washington. We're glad to get your perspective this morning. We did, of course, reach out to former Governor Tom Ridge, and he's not doing any media right now. But good to have you with us. Let's just hear, Fran, how this quote went down from his book. He said Ashcroft, I'm assuming, strongly urged an increase in the threat level and was supported by Rumsfeld. There was absolutely no support for that position within our department. He's speaking of Homeland Security here. None. I wondered, is this about security or politics? And Fran, you were in those meetings. What is your recollection of how that whole conversation went down?
Kieran, I actually chaired the meeting and called it. Tom Ridge knew very well that I agreed with him that I didn't believe there was a basis to raise the threat level, but I knew there were others in the Homeland Security Council that did believe that, and we agreed that we would have the conversation. By the way, what Tom Ridge's book doesn't say is the most eloquent case for not raising the threat level was not made by Tom. In fact, it was made by Secretary of State at the time, Colin Powell. And Bob Mueller, at great personal risk, remember, his boss, John Ashcroft, was advocating to raise it based on the facts of the intelligence. Bob Mueller himself made an eloquent case not to raise it.
But he's basically saying that he felt politics played into those decisions, and it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of him deciding to get out of federal government. Do you think that politics came into the equation at all during that time when it came to deciding whether or not to raise the threat level?
Not only do I not think that politics played any part in it at all, it was never discussed. In fact, the only thing that was discussed was the summer of that, earlier that summer, there had been a threat against the financial district. There was the bin Laden tape, and then there was another tape, Kieran, by Adam Gaddan, a U.S. citizen who was a member of al-Qaeda, and it was a very threatening tape. And so the discussion really revolved around what the intelligence was. There was no discussion of politics whatsoever.
Hey, Fran, it's John. There was also some controversy following the 2004 Democratic National Convention in Boston when the threat level was raised, and was later found out that a lot of the information, or at least some of the information that played into that decision to raise the threat level, was 3 years old. So there were a lot of people who were already suspicious. I mean, when you take these two things in combination, does it suggest that maybe people were looking at this idea of, well, it is the fall of the election campaign, we're in a tight race here with John Kerry, maybe we could work some things to our advantage?
In fact, not only was there no discussion in those meetings, the discussions on the margins, one of the people who was in that meeting was John McLaughlin, the acting director of CIA, and John Brennan, the current Homeland Security advisor, was then the head of the National Counterterrorism Center. The only discussions I recall were on the margins of that. There was concern that if the intelligence supported raising the threat level, it might actually redound to the detriment of President Bush because people might perceive it being political. But, in the end, John, and people have got to remember, you want the cabinet members who disagree to have a healthy debate, and this, in the end, came out in the right place. The threat level was not raised, and there's no reason to suspect that this discussion would have had any impact on the election whatsoever.
One of the other things that people are asking about is, when we talk about whether or not politics played into any of this equation, a lot of people say that perhaps there are some political ambitions on the part of Tom Ridge, and that he wants to perhaps separate himself from the Bush administration in some ways moving forward. Do you think that what he wrote or what he's alleging here perhaps has a political motivation?
I've got to believe it does, Kieran, and I'm sorry to say that because I really enjoyed working with Tom Ridge. But I will tell you, not only did he never say this at the time, that he thought political influence was involved in the raising or lowering of the threat level, he's never said it since when I've spoken to him. And just 2 weeks ago, I'm co-chairing, along with Bill Webster, a bipartisan task force to make recommendations to Secretary Napolitano now about the threat advisory system. One of the things we obviously did was ask Tom Ridge and Secretary Chertoff to come in and talk to the panel. This is 2 weeks ago, and Tom Ridge never in that meeting ever mentioned any concern, and he mentioned what concerns he had, He never mentioned any concern about politicization of the threat advisory system. So you've got to believe that this is personally motivated in some way.
And he's not coming out to talk about this until the 1st of September. Between now and then, I mean, Scott McClellan, former press secretary, alluded to this in a Politico article, that if he doesn't have specifics to back this up, he's going to get eaten alive by folks like you, Andy Card, and other Bush administration officials who are just going to try to slam him down as hard as they can.
Well, John, I'll tell you, last night I got my hands on one of the books, and I looked at it. And in fact, in other parts of the book, Tom acknowledges that politics never played a role in any of his decisions about the threat alert system. So, you got to wonder if this is not just publicity meant to sell more books.
All right. Fran Townsend for us this morning. Fran, thanks.
Thank you.